Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching.
Thank you. What a day. Joel Day is just working us hard, man. He is like, you are going to learn something today. And I think he's done a great job about that. I'm Christina Walbrecht. I'm a professor of political science here at the University of Notre Dame. It's my pleasure to be your host and moderator for our last event of the day. We have also fed you well, and I hope that continues afterwards as well. And so we're thrilled to have you here at Notre Dame. Joel said I had to be sure to introduce myself, so I'll just say the part that is most relevant for what we're doing right now, which is that I, along with Professor Dave Campbell, who leads I'm really going to get this to open in a second, who leads our democracy initiative. Our most recent book is called See Jane Run, and it's about the impact of women candidates on the beliefs about women leaders, the beliefs about democracy, and the interest in getting politically engaged of adolescents. And I will sum up that book by saying women leaders really matter. They really sort of transform the way that adolescents think about and participate in politics. And so it's thrilling to have two really role models here today of the possibility of women's leadership. and of course, crossing this rural-urban divide. So let me go ahead and introduce each of them, and then we're going to have a conversation up here for about 45 minutes, and then we will turn and have some time for questions from the audience. So let me start with Jane Kleeb on my far left. Is the chair of the Nebraska Democratic Party, president of the Association of State Democratic Committees, and Democratic National Committee vice chair. Jane got her start in party politics as executive director of the Young Democrats of America. Under Chair Kleeb's leadership in Nebraska, the number of Democrats elected up and down the ballot has grown from about 500 in 2016 to over 1,025 in 2025. Innovative programs such as Block Captains, 93 County Voter Guides, and the Candidates of Color Fund were created under her leadership. Jane is the author of, and I love this title, Harvest the Vote, How Democrats Can Win Again in Rural America, which will, this is important to say, be available for purchase and signature right after this event out in the lobby. To my more immediate left, currently in her third term, Mayor Mattie Parker leads the nation's fastest growing city, Fort Worth, Texas. When Mayor Parker ran successfully for the first time, she was the youngest mayor and the first millennial to lead a major American city. Mayor Parker has worked with the police and fire departments to build solutions for some of the city's toughest and longest standing issues, such as integrating services to provide an EMS system that prioritizes high quality patient care. In 2023, she created Good Natured, a Fort Worth green space initiative and bold investment in natural community spaces. That partnership has set an aggressive goal to add 10,000 acres of open green space to Fort Worth by 2028. Mayor Parker, who serves as the co-chair of the National Mayors for Parks Coalition, also saw the first bond program in city history that included dedicated funds for open space conservation. Mayor Parker is a licensed attorney with more than 18 years of experience in national, state, and local public affairs, including her service as the chief of staff for Mayor Betsy Price and the Fort Worth City Council. Please join me in welcoming them to Notre Dame. To sit down. I think we're working. So let me just sort of open up our conversation by asking both of you to sort of tell us about the urban-rural issues in your own states, and how do you see politics cutting across the urban-rural divide? Why don't we start with you, Mayor Parker?
Sure. Well, good evening. Nice to see all of you. And it's our first trip to South Bend and to Notre Dame, so thank you for welcoming us. I have a different lens. Obviously, I'm mayor of a large city, 10th largest city in the country, over 1 million people, part of DFW. North Texas is growing like crazy. I shared with a small group today, just to kind of context set for a minute, DFW will be the third largest metro region in the entire country within the next 2 years, so passing Chicago. But I am from a very small town. I grew up in Hyco, Texas, a town of 1,500 people. I had 42 kids in my graduating class, and I had a party line for a phone until I was 15 years old.
If you don't know what that is.
Yeah, if you don't know what that is, I can tell you. You get your neighbors off the phone to make a phone call. So I see it with a certain level of empathy and understanding in the rural-urban divide, which I think is unique. Texas is built on the American workforce, from farming, from agriculture to small manufacturing. The small town I grew up in, the nuclear power plant in Glen Rose is 20 minutes away, and so we had a large workforce there as well. And a lot of the issues today really had me thinking about how do you bridge those gaps. But it really does just come down to important conversations. I know there's a lot of fear around the polarization of rural versus urban, and maybe because what you oftentimes see in media is a sensationalization of people that are in office that you just cannot stand or you wouldn't want to have a beer with on both sides of the aisle, quite frankly. But in my experience in Texas, there are a handful that don't fit in this category. But for the large majority, both Republicans and Democrats that are elected to statewide office or to our state legislature are really great people, and they probably could fit in either party in many ways. And 90% of the issues they really do agree upon. And I was encouraged this last election cycle where there were a few Republicans I really respect that were getting attacked from the right, and they all won their primary elections, which is incredibly encouraging. They were able to fend off the crazy to some extent, which is great. The last thing I'll mention more on just the political landscape in Texas, and really I think this translates across the country, is we spend so much time talking about party, and it's really about people. It's about candidate quality. It's about folks that you'd actually want to have a beer with, that you'd want to sit down and have a conversation with. And on the Republican side, I can tell you we have lost sight of that immensely. We are running people that are effective in a primary election where only 15% of the electorate are actually voting, and they're kind of feeding into the frenetic frenzy of polarization. But I think if we all, both parties for that matter, return to great folks that want to serve their local communities or serve in state government and do a great job and try to build consensus, that's really how you build any kind of divide, but especially around rural and urban, because their issues can be different, but it takes an immense amount of listening and trying to pull people together and that empathy that's so important in leadership today.
Chair Kleeb.
Yeah, I mean, first, I got to visit with the mayor earlier about data centers in a breakout group.
We did not solve it, by the way.
We didn't solve it, but we had lots of good ideas. And I think those conversations need to continue. And it just keeps on reinforcing to me that when you have and face big issues and you really come to the table with the belief that you can come to solutions, we can do this in America. We've solved big problems before. And yes, there is this massive divide in our nation. But I do believe that Gen X and millennials really do want to come together and solve problems. And maybe the baby boomers at one point wanted to as well. But I think that it's up to us now to figure this out because we have a lot of issues in our country and our communities to solve. But first, your campus is absolutely beautiful. Precious and I, who's with me, she's executive director of not only Nebraska, but she's the president of all the executive directors across the nation of Democrats. We went and lit a candle in the grotto for people that we've lost. And so your campus is absolutely beautiful. You could say that Precious and I are the face of urban and rural in our state. I live in a small town, Hastings. Our claim to fame, because in Nebraska, each of our small towns have a claim to fame. We're very proud of that. We invented Kool-Aid.
That's a pretty good one.
It's a good one. And no, the cult did not use Kool-Aid, even though I know that's the saying. They used a knockoff called Flavor Aid, and we like to, set the record straight whenever I get the mic. But Precious lives in Omaha. I live in Hastings. And when Precious came on, she first started as an organizer. She worked her way up to be executive director. We really create program together. We make sure that we are creating program that honors and respects both urban and rural in our state. So one of those examples is our block captain program. In politics, you have a program called precinct captains, but we thought that that was too much responsibility for volunteers. That's like 1,500 people that one volunteer is supposed to be in charge of. So we brought it down to 50 people. So our block captains are responsible for 50 people in their neighborhoods. In our rural communities, we sometimes break that down to 25 because in rural communities, sometimes you have a mile between homes or farms. And that really brings it to more of a focus and respect of neighbors talking to neighbors. They need to talk to their neighbors 3 times every single year, not just during elections. As Democrats, and I think even Republicans, we've lost really touch with the fact that you have to talk to people, not just 2 months before the elections. And sometimes we blame political parties for that, but a lot of that's also structural. In our party, before 2008, in 2004, Howard Dean created this program called the 50-State Strategy. Every single state party was getting $25,000 a month to fund organizing, right? So if you were a small state, a red state, you could at least have 3 staff members, open an office, and you could actually do organizing. We were winning elections all across the country in blue states, red states, and purple states. Barack Obama came along, and he had a really difficult time with the party because he thought that the party really had the back of Hillary Clinton. And so he created an entire outside infrastructure called Organizing for America. That $25,000 went down to $2,500 a month to state parties. What happened? We lost 1,500 seats over the next 3 years. When you stop investing in infrastructure, you cannot talk to voters. And we are still catching up as the Democratic Party. When I became president of ASDC and we have our new chair, Ken Martin, We're now up to 22,500 going into state parties, and we already see the results. Democrats have won 90% of the 300 elections this past in 2025 because we're getting back to the basics, right? Where you're investing in local elections and local people in state parties. We deeply believe, I believe as an organizer, our chair believes as well, that you don't win elections in Washington, D.C. You win elections at the state and at the local level, and I think that's how you begin to bridge urban and rural as well.
Thank you. Let's all point out that I was the only one not told to wear cowboy boots today, and I'm okay with that, but I'll be solving that later. Mayor Parker, let's return to you again. You're a Republican. We were just talking about this, probably the only current Republican mayor of one of the largest cities in the United States. It's also, as you said, one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing state area and city in the United States. How do you see those demographic shifts that go along with growth changing the politics of your city? And how do you think you as a politician need to respond to those sorts of the changing composition of what your city looks like?
Well, this may not be well known to this audience, but in Fort Worth, the mayor's race, you don't run in a partisan election. I don't run with an R or D beside my name. I actually think that's quite powerful. And I was elected by Republicans and Democrats, independents in my city. And as a result, I'm expected to build consensus and work across the dais and work across the aisle on a daily basis. And frankly, it's a great system because I wouldn't get anything done otherwise. We wouldn't have a vote every Tuesday. It'd be a constant mess. I'm very proud of the support that came from our campaign, but really it stemmed from when I ran in 2021. Our family had to decide I was running within a week of January 6th. So it was not the best time to jump into office, honestly, or into a campaign. But I really ran for a variety of reasons, but there was such polarization in the candidates. It was far right and far left, and no one with experience. And so I've just tried to remember, even on the hard days, why I ran in the first place. Because being a mayor does take a tremendous amount of attention of leadership, humility, a lot of lessons learned, especially when you're a growing city like Fort Worth, and there are so many competing things for your time and prioritization. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to other American cities and why Republicans aren't winning, a lot of times they're not running. Like common sense conservatives are not running for mayor in this country. Have they seeded that? I don't know. I can't answer that. Has there been a system in place? No, not at all. But I also was telling Christina before we started talking, I have some wonderful colleagues in U.S. Conference of Mayors and others that are part of both parties. And guess what? We all get along just fine, right? Our issues are so similar. And we often really wish that the rest of the country in some ways was built like the local governance system, forcing you to really work across the aisle and work together. Mm-hmm. I do believe when I think about upcoming elections for Fort Worth, both in the mayor's office and other elections that are happening right now in Texas, the culture wars are quite damaging. They're really difficult to see past, especially for someone like me, who's very proudly labeled a rhino and has been for a while. And because I don't find it interesting. I don't think it moves the needle, and it doesn't allow my city to thrive and grow, and it's actually none of my business. And so what I've tried to do is ignore to the extent I can. But what is really interesting, and I'm curious what you're seeing in Nebraska, mm-hmm. is the polarization that's happened across the country is now sort of resting in American cities as well. I'm sure Omaha is not immune to this either, where the factions are so mobilized that, and I mean, when I say factions, I mean 20% of the country, 10% over here, 10% over here, are funded and mobilized and angry about, they don't even know, they forgot why they're angry. And so now, where do they go with their frustration and their anger? If they're not marching in the street, then they show up in your city council chambers to scream and yell. And both sides do this. And those things are incredibly damaging. Yeah. The last asterisk that I think we'll have time to talk about today is my deep concern that great people will stop running for office. The sacrifice is so intense. The money that it takes to run, the factions that you're forced to align yourself with, especially in partisan elections. So I'm sure as you're recruiting candidates and it's a tough conversation for people, right? To make sure they feel protected enough to run for office in the first place.
Yeah, it's actually really, so I think the reverse is true right now for Democrats, because there's this resurgence happening where there's a feeling that the blue wave is at our backs right now.
So they want to be a part of it.
And that Trump has he's broken so many promises, he's gone so far right that people feel like this is a moment where they want to run. And so this past cycle, and it's true for a lot of states like South Carolina, Indiana, lots of states are showing record numbers of candidate recruitment for legislature. So you're seeing the reverse, I think, for us. But I've been on the other side of that ledger before.
Yeah, I will say we were talking about some of the work I've been doing with others in this room about local political ambition, and particularly for women, I don't want my privacy invaded, I don't want harassment, I don't want
100%.
nasty things said on social media, right? It's already a hard job, and we have not made it easier in sort of some of our communication, et cetera. Let me also ask that same question, though, to you, Chair Kleeb. How is the Democratic Party of Nebraska confronting the urban-rural divide? And, I think many Democrats used to think of Nebraska really just focused on Omaha, this blue dot in a sea of red. And I know that you have argued for a very different path. And so I'd be interested to hear how you're thinking about that in your state.
Yeah. I mean, we're very proud of our blue dot. We split our electoral votes in Nebraska. It's a unique system, us in Maine. So we did get that blue dot for Biden and for Kamala Harris. But, we're very proud of the fact that we have lots of blue dots and growing blue dots across the entire state. So we are very much in the belief that we are only 30% of the electorate as Democrats across the state of Nebraska. So I am not going to win statewide or win a lot of races if I am just winning or running as just Democrats and I don't care about anybody else. So we very much are a coalition party. So we are, for example, supporting Dan Osborne, who's an independent, running for U.S. Senate. And we're running as a coalition that we believe is going to take Democrats, Republicans, and independents to break up this one-party rule that exists in our state. And I do think when you have one-party rule in any state, that it does lead to corruption. It leads to a lack of creativity. When you have Democrats, Republicans, and independents in a room creating policy, you challenge each other. Your policy's better. It's going to be longer lasting. And so that's what we are trying to do. We're trying to make sure that you have Republicans, Democrats, and independents elected at all levels. Obviously, it's my job to elect Democrats as the chair of the Democratic Party, but I also know for some of those offices, this is about building a coalition. In some of the offices, we can go pure partisan, pure Dem, right, in some of those districts, but it's not many in the state of Nebraska. So this is about building a coalition. And we do that with, some of the materials on your table, the keep your guns, keep your meat, keep your land. That definitely ruffled some feathers in our party when we created that flyer. We use that in a lot of our rural organizing at county fairs, for example, or when we do outreach at rodeos. Republicans were saying that we were going to take people's land when Biden put out that 30 by 30 program. If you're into land conservation, you know about that program. Or when AOC did her Green New Deal, Republicans were saying we were going to take people's meat away. And Republicans are always saying we're going to take their guns, which we never have. So we want it to be like in your face, saying that's not the Democrat stance. In fact, we believe in the Second Amendment. We deeply have a deep ranching culture. I'm married to somebody in the cattle business. And we're the party, actually, that stands up for property rights. The Keystone XL fight in our state was led by a lot of Democrats, but it was a coalition of Republicans, Democrats, and independents. But a lot of the leaders were Democrats. And that was a big fight to stop the use of eminent domain for private gain. So I think it's really important when you're creating these coalitions. I always tell the progressives in our party, that doesn't mean that you leave behind your values. It doesn't mean that you say that you're not a Democrat. You can still be a proud partisan Democrat, but you're creating a coalition.
This is a great segue into sort of my next question, which is, as you've already said, in Nebraska, there might not be a Democrat running for every office. In some Fort Worth districts or in deeper blue urban areas, there might not be a Republican running for that, for every seat that's sort of available. And I guess I'm wondering how you think about that. Under what conditions, and you've already sort of suggested one, can you see yourself backing someone from the other party? Mm-hmm. Maybe if you want to continue on that about your example?
Yeah, I think when there are folks that are running for office that share a lot of our values but might be an independent, then we are absolutely supporting them. So we're supporting about 4 independent candidates for state legislature. We have a very unique system in Nebraska. It's only 1 house, and it's a nonpartisan unicameral. So there's not an R or a D next to your name when you're elected. So it gives us a lot of opportunity to create coalition, especially in our rural areas. So there's 4 independent candidates that we are supporting with party resources, access to our voter file. We'll run mail programs with them. Our block captain programs are carrying materials for them. And I think this is what democracy is all about. And I wish there were more nonpartisan races, quite frankly, across our country where voters could come together like that. I do think one of the biggest reasons we've gone from 503 Democrats elected in our state to now 1,029 is because we do a partisan voter guide to our Democrats and independents who lean our way. So there are so many nonpartisan races. We need to educate our Democratic voters who the Democrats are. And so we have a voter guide specialized for 93 of our counties. Not a lot of state parties do this. I think there's about 3 state parties in the nation that do it personalized for counties from top of the ticket all the way down. So if you're kind of a person out there wanting to get involved, or you're watching online and wondering what can I do at my local level, I am a big on my soapbox all the time about voter guides. There's a lot of people out there who want to go to the ballot box and want to do the right thing, electing good people, but then they get into the ballot box and they don't know who these people are on the down ballot races, which are the most critical. Mayors, city council, county commission, they're the ones who are making all the decisions in your daily lives.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking about the question and the topic at hand, right, about the rural-urban divide, and while you're all here. And in many ways, I think our bigger concern is less about party and more about polarization, right? Mm-hmm. And I think this is especially true of our more rural areas, where because your primary turnout is so incredibly low, that's why you're getting polarized candidates running, right? And if you could just increase, and I'm sure you're working on this, increase your primary turnout, that's right, just a few percentage points every election to tick that up and create a better balance of polarization, I think you would see a huge return on that. In Tarrant County right now, and across Texas because of the Tallarico, Corn, and Paxton race, everybody's at each other's throats, right, in terms of where that ends up. But I still believe right now, at this moment, because things have been so intense, the majority of Americans really are tired of polarization. They're ready for us to roll up our sleeves and get good work done. Yep. And you've had some pretty surprising races in Texas in particular. One was a Senate District 9 race, which is a solidly Republican district that flipped to Democrat because Senator Remmett, who just took office, it's a complicated story. He has to run again in November to see if he keeps the seat. But he didn't say Democrat once in his mailers. He was about being a machinist from Lockheed Martin, a working class guy from Fort Worth, and the campaign worked. And so those concepts I think are so important. Do I support Democrats? Absolutely, I do, right? I've endorsed people to run for council in particular. And I just want good people to be in office because I think at the end of the day, that's what keeps this American experiment going, is having the right people in leadership.
And there's just one structural thing too. As a state party, you can allow independents to vote in your party's primary. Not a lot of state parties decide to do that. Nebraska has. There's been a couple other states.
Was that a fight to be able to do that for you?
Yeah. So, some state party chairs, I'm sure, that are watching this are already sneering at me like, oh my God, why do you do that? But, I really do believe, especially in red states, you have to create a coalition. And if you want independent voters to vote for your candidates in the general, you should be inviting them to vote for your candidates in the primary as well. And so that is another kind of structural thing that we can do to invite more independents. And, we also have to be recruiting candidates who look and sound like our states, look and sound like our community. So it's more moms and dads, it's veterans, it's young people. It's just people who are coming from different walks of life. When I was growing up, candidates were always lawyers and doctors, or folks from the military, right? It was like in those 3 categories. And now we're really very conscious about how can we recruit people from all walks of life who really look like our state.
I do think, and what's I think important about that is it's a dimension of diversity we don't always talk about, right? Like, where are the nurses? Where are the school teachers? The other people in moving into that kind of public service? Yeah. So I think one of the themes for today has really been how much that a lot of this is driven by a lot of disruption and change, population shifts, changes in the economy. As someone said this morning, you know, we just made it past deindustrialization, and now we're leaping into all these technological changes, et cetera. And underlying that seems to be something of a realignment of the parties. So when I went to graduate school, which I will grant you was, you know, the Stone Age, one of the truths of American politics is the more educated you were, the more likely it was that you voted Republican. And that was like, you know, one of the 10 commandments that's always true. That has changed in my time, in my adult lifetime, and has had huge consequences for the political parties. And so I guess sort of stepping back, I'm curious as how each of you sort of sees the current position of both parties. Like, what is the greatest strength, both of you, of the Democrats right now, but what is also their greatest weakness? And the same for the Republicans, right? What are their opportunities? And where do you see the parties not quite meeting the moment?
Yeah. Well, I think for Democrats right now, their greatest strength seems to be Trump. And that's where they're running, right? And constantly mentioning that, making sure that's at the forefront. I think they also have, you know, young, excited talent, to your point. They're kind of riding that blue wave right now and feeling that momentum. I think their weakness is what does their future look like? Who's going to lead the Democratic Party? What are they motivated by? And I do think, we talked about this today a lot, they were long time, the Democrats were known as the working class party. And in many circles, and this is happening in Texas, they sound elitist. Mm-hmm. And it's off-putting and annoying, and people walk away. And as a result, it will cost them elections if they can't kind of self-correct a little bit. You're even seeing James Tallarico try to grapple with that a little bit in his campaign rhetoric, the way he's talking to people. Despite his high education, he's trying to appeal, which is quite interesting. For Republicans, weakness is Trump, because our party presumably will be post-Trump era at some point in the next few years. And who emerges as a leader or the leaders is an incredibly important bench. Sure. We need to return to a level of sensibility and compassionate conservatism and people in office that you can actually respect and that lead with decorum. And that has had a direct impact. The way federal leaders have acted, including the president, has trickled down into a level of behavior that it's almost intolerable, right? And so, you know, back to basics. And I mean, honestly, I think a lot of Republicans feel like, what does the party even represent anymore? On the positive, you know, I'll give you the state of Texas, for instance. The state of Texas is the 8th largest economy in the entire world. Democrats haven't had a public office in Texas in 30 years. Our economy is booming at every single level. Every city is successful. Rural Texas is largely successful. I could go on and on, from film industry to energy, to manufacturing. And there is something to that, because at the end of the day, people often do vote. It's the economy, stupid, right? And that's the risk right now for Republicans, though, because there's so much shaky ground, whether you blame it on Iran or something else, there's so much uncertainty. And it's impacting every single race, because Americans naturally are asking, what are you doing in my pocketbook? I can't pay for gas, I can't afford to go to the grocery store, and now I can't afford my house. And so it's a mixture for both. Yeah. And you know, ironically, Democrats got blamed for the same thing in the 2024 election. So you see, it goes both ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, obviously, the Republicans' greatest weakness right now is Trump. The cruelty.
Look at her smile.
The cruelty that he has shown for citizens, and I think in the threat to democracy. You know, the executive order that he, you know, signed yesterday, with threats to vote by mail is just the latest. Mm-hmm. The recklessness that he has done with Iran, the list is long. And I think that has really damaged the brand of Republicans. I served on our school board, and there was 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats, 3 independents. It was a beautiful experience. And not a single Republican that I served with would ever act like Trump. They would never treat any of our kiddos that way. About 25% of the kids in our small town are Latino, and would have never treated any of our Latino families in the way that Trump and ICE is treating Latino families across our country. So I think it is a major liability for the Republican Party and will be for a generation. I think you're going to see that in big numbers in the 26th election. Now, with our party, like, our greatest strength is our coalition, but it is also like one of our weaknesses, because we are such a broad coalition that it sometimes means that we have 16 million different messages, and people will say to us, what's our message? Who's your leader? And the beautiful thing about us is we have, like 30, top leaders. We don't have one single leader, but that's also hurts us sometimes because there's lots of different messages. And I think a lot of Americans know that we are the party of the people, that we look out for people, but something that we're hearing, because we're obviously doing a lot of internal reflection, we're doing a lot of focus groups to really listen to people on what did we do so wrong that we lost against Trump in 24. And we're hearing a lot and learning a lot in that process. And one of the things that has definitely hit me in the gut is that folks are saying, look, like, we get it. The Democrats are the party of the people and the Republicans are the party of big corporations. But at least when the Republicans get power, they yield it. We may not like what they're doing with the power, but they yield it. And the Democrats, when you guys get power, you basically just talk a lot about process. And you don't do anything for the people. And so that is a big message to us if we win power in 26, whether that's the House and the Senate, if we win like we hope we do at the state and local level, that we have to deliver immediately, right? Like what Governor Walz did. He made sure immediately that he was delivering for working class and middle class families, making sure that kids had full bellies so they could learn in school, where they had, free breakfast and lunch. Immediate things, right? Biden was focusing on infrastructure things that was 10, 15, 20 years down the road that people maybe didn't see immediate impacts. Lasting major change that he did, but it was not immediate. So as Democrats, we need to get better about that and delivering immediately. Also still having some big vision, whether that's gonna make sure that every 30-year-old, is able to afford a house so they can put roots down and grow a family. But we've got to start delivering for families again. It's been our biggest mistake that we've done over the past 20 years as Democrats.
I think that's really interesting, and I want to sort of take that and now return us back to local, which is one of the things we talk a lot about in political science is the nationalization of politics. That it used to be when you voted for your mayor, even your state legislator, you were thinking about the guy you knew down the street, you were thinking about what the Democratic Republican Party did in your state, right? Now you're running for school board as a Republican and people are saying you must be just like Donald Trump, or you're a Democrat running in a rural area and they're saying, right, you want to take my guns, you are like this, Democrat in a whole different part of the country. And so sort of how do you at the state and local level think about here's what's happening nationally and what people are seeing on social media and all those sorts of things. How do I then talk to voters here about our Democrats, our Republicans, or just specifically what our candidates are going to do? Maybe I'll Chair Kleeb to start.
Yeah, I mean, if I think about like the Georgia Public Service Commission race that happened last year, because affordability is the new talking point, right? Like that's the new buzzword that all the candidates and the parties are talking about, that we have to, figure out how we're talking to voters about affordability. And those two candidates, they were running statewide. There was not a single Democrat elected to the Public Service Commission. And they clearly were going to be talking about affordability too. For them, that meant they were talking about the increase in utility bills by 25%. But then they also started talking about data centers. Data centers are an increasingly hot topic in a lot of communities, both urban and rural communities. Land use, water, the shifting of electricity rates, decommissioning, the list is long about data centers. And that's what they were talking to voters about, and they were connecting it then back to folks' utility bills. And that definitely worked. And so I think sometimes where there's this big kind of national umbrella that comes on down from the national pollsters, you should be talking about affordability. You as a candidate have to figure out, what does that mean for me? And how do I make sure that that actually connects with the people that I'm supposed to be working for and delivering for? Yeah.
Well, on a daily basis in my life as a mayor, I don't talk about Republicans and Democrats, so that is helpful in terms of what's going on. And sometimes I'm not a child, but it's just ignoring the noise as much as possible because it doesn't actually pertain to me of what I'm doing to govern, and it doesn't matter to the daily lives of Fort Worth residents and what we're trying to accomplish at City Hall. But there are long-term repercussions of that, right? Trying to label, to your point, issues that happen nationally to individual council members, whether they're Republicans or Democrats or how they identify. It's also interesting that the phenomenon of those running for local office are more partisan already. And I have council members, that's their prerogative to do so. They use their personal social media or their campaign social media to talk about which Senate candidate they're supporting, which state rep, which county judge. That never used to happen. No one cared about the selfie you took with the person you were supporting on the weekend. That has totally changed. And it's just social media. It's the way people consume their news. And we have not figured out how to do that yet. City governments are traditionally abysmal at communicating anyway. And I don't know that that changes anytime soon because now you're competing with all these different priorities. It is unfortunate, absolutely, and it just lends itself to be even more important as to who's running, who's willing to be in those office and to lead.
Yeah, I think I hear this in what both of you have said. I've heard this sort of throughout today, is this sort of exhaustion with partisanship and polarization, which are not the same thing, but are often seen as the same thing, right? And we know that historically high numbers of Americans are just pretty much fed up with both political parties, right? And so, and you talked about spring independence, et cetera. We always hear about third parties, that possibility, and then all the political scientists in the room have to tell you why that's not going to happen. But that being said, is there a common agenda? Are there issues? Are there solutions? Are there even problems? I sort of hear that what you're saying about data centers. Like, this is something we're hearing concerns about on both sides, and concerns in different ways. But you know, that we might see, and this has again been the promise of local politics for more than 100 years in the United States, where this more of a pragmatic approach to problem solving, to policy making, et cetera. And I'm just wondering how you guys think about what would a winning coalition look like, and what would be some of those issues that you think you could kind of build these broader coalitions around?
Yeah. You know, I think obviously healthcare will always be an evergreen issue that people care about. We have not solved healthcare yet in our country. You know, Obamacare took one step forward in making sure that people had access to the exchange, and it was a marketplace kind of solution towards that. You know, there's other ideas on, you know, opening up Medicaid and Medicare for anybody who wants to buy into it if your employer doesn't provide insurance. There's lots of different solutions out there, but I think the bottom line is that everybody should have health insurance, and it should be affordable, and you should be able to go to a hospital, and you should be able to get mental health access as well within, you know, 10 miles of your home, and that's not the case. You know, my doctor who delivered 2 of our babies is now delivering babies for women in 52 counties, 52 in our state, because rural hospitals are only providing critical care now in their towns rather than being able to provide maternal care. And that means that moms and babies are less safe in our country. And this is a big issue that Republicans and Democrats can come around. We can also come around, you know, public education, that every kiddo should be able to go to school. And maybe we have to start to rethink how we're doing public education. Public education should start at pre-K. It should not start at kindergarten. Our kids should start school at 3 years old. And that would also save a lot of money for working parents, you know, save 2 years of daycare. So there are big problems that we all could solve. And I think as like Gen X and millennials are rising into these leadership positions, we've seen the bickering of trying to solve these big problems for the last 20 years, and that we failed, and we can come up with innovative solutions to do it.
I mean, to your question about whether a coalition or independent option is possible, I don't think so right now. At risk of sounding trivial, I'll quote Jerry Maguire, show me the money. The amount of money that is poured into primaries, both Democrats and Republicans, is real. The way consultancies are set up, it is a true system. And until that is broken apart in some way, I don't see that happening. Yep. You know, my race is unique. because I don't run partisan, but I can just tell you, in a mayor's race in our city, I raised $2 million just to get into the runoff, and then had to raise essentially another $1 million to get me through June a month later. And I had to fight more with consultants about what I wouldn't say on a mailer. I mean, I refused to say anything negative. And I got in more fights about that than I did with anything else. And that was in a mayor's race that was nonpartisan. Imagine if you're a kind of an innovative Democrat or Republican that wants to talk about really different issues and you're not cookie cutter enough. It's kind of difficult to do that. You know, Texas is a really big state, and the way campaigns are divided is real. And back to the turnout, it's incredibly low. And so you're only rewarded. You won't make it through a primary if you don't say the obnoxious things on both sides. I mean, I have Democrats and Republican friends who don't like what they have to say to get elected in those primaries, which is really, really difficult to say. A plug for female leaders. I do think women are oftentimes a bit more willing to, at least in my experience in serving with some of my fellow women on council, that we have a sense of urgency that's different.
Interesting.
Especially around, and I think the sacrifice is unique. You know, when my 15-year-old's here with me today, but when I was elected, our youngest was 5. And then, you know, raising children, doing all the things you ask, like, where are the nurses and the other professions? They're freaking working, y'all. Yeah. They can't afford to go to the legislature every other year and work in Austin. You have to be independently wealthy or someone's paying the bill for you. Yep. Mm-hmm. So the system's very flawed, which is why you end up having this, you know, the types of people that you have run. And we don't have time to talk about that day. I hope you write about it in one of your future books. But, you know, supporting just normal, everyday Americans, running them to be in, it's not just about their campaigns, it's also about supporting them when they're in office. And creating the infrastructure to support just normal folks from both sides of the aisle is missing. Because oftentimes we run these campaigns, we are really proud, go forth and conquer, and then they're alone. And you don't have anybody. So hopefully you are doing more of that in Nebraska to really support people that win and are serving.
So I like that we're wrapping up our part with women leaders are good.
That's right.
It's the money, stupid. And at the end of the day, these are about structures, right?
Yeah.
We're existing within these sort of broader systems. And so that all warms my social science heart. But we should not just hear from social scientists. So let me now turn to our audience and make sure we have some time for our questions for the audience. Again, can we applaud our microphone runner, who is definitely the hardest working person today for sure. So if folks want to raise their hands, I'll point to folks, we'll bring a microphone, etc. We'll start right here. Microphone's on its way.
Hi. Thank you so much. This was fascinating. I just wanted to ask, I'm going to shamefully say I am a social scientist.
It's okay. It's allowed.
I just was wondering, like, there is such a lot of harassment of women in politics. The politics in general has become so, you know, there's so much misogyny, hate, and so forth, threats against women. And I know this may differ depending on your particular position within politics, but I wondered whether you've experienced this yourselves and whether it changes your behavior and what you would say to girls who want to come up, because girls are not going into politics as much. They are becoming more hesitant to enter politics. And as we were saying, it's really important they do, right? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I have experienced that, you know, threats of sexual violence. You know, when you're on social media, unfortunately, the whole world is exposed to you, so your DMs become incredibly toxic. The best thing I can tell women is just don't read the comments, and you don't have access to your DMs. And I have a great security team that keeps all that away. You know, our household has been doxxed. We've had all those. We've had a coffin delivered on our front lawn. All of those things are real. Political violence is real. I take it incredibly seriously. I don't find it funny. I don't find it flippant on any side of the aisle. So yes, all those things are true. But I often, when I'm talking to young women in particular, or honestly any young person that's interested in running for office, the flip side is also true. People are genuinely good. And even the people that I interact with on a daily basis, I can sort of counteract all the negativity that I've seen. I don't know how you fix some of the things that happen via social media. And I do think technology companies have a role to play And it's incredibly important they take it seriously because our democracy is at stake. And it's the same thing you saw in 2020 with misinformation around COVID and the election. It's no different to how it becomes personalized to individual candidates or people that are running for office.
Yeah. And political violence is real.
Yes.
And so as women, I feel like we get even more comments about our looks
all the time.
versus, men. And so that's constant. So when I am visiting with women who are about to, are thinking about running for office, first of all, American University did a study that it takes women to be asked, 7 to 10 times to be asked. Men are like, yeah, sure, sign me up. And women are a lot more thoughtful about it and have to be asked to convince that, yes, you have the brains. And every woman in here, you do. You have the brains to do it. You have really good ideas. But yeah, the threats are real in direct messages, in person. You have to have very thick skin to be in this world. And if you look at the messages, you can't internalize them. And so I always tell folks, but you also can't totally ignore some of those political threats. Like, this morning, one of our candidates had a political threat. We had to alert the police. And this is now normal course for Precious and I. There's a system that we have in place. We tell all of our candidates the process. We have a security checklist for all of our candidates on how to get a security system in your house. And it's now, that is the norm. That was not the norm when I first became chair in 2017. That is the norm now.
The book that Chair Kleeb is mentioning is called "It Takes a Candidate," and that's exactly right. Okay. Both the not believing that we're qualified enough, even when on paper women are just as qualified. That's not just in politics; that's everywhere. But also the greater threat for sure. Other questions? Here.
Hi, pleasure. Is it? Yeah, it's on. I have a question about Nebraska. The Democratic Party of Nebraska, as you have said, aims to present a unified coalition alongside independents and moderate Republicans to remain competitive. I am interested in your take on how that manifests, or rather fails to manifest, when facing seemingly moderate Republicans in statewide races. For instance, Pete Ricketts has had his severe issues with Trump, which has provoked some people to label him a moderate. Jim Pillen wasn't Trump's preferred choice during the 2022 gubernatorial primaries, and they both won. I want to know whether that has affected your strategy, and also as you have said, with Howard Dean and the 50-state strategy during 2006 was the last time a Democrat won a statewide office in Nebraska. I want to know why hasn't the strategy of how can you change? What do you intend to do to change the strategy on how you face so-called moderate Republicans? And on the subject of women in politics, the only four statewide women to be elected in Nebraska have been through the Republican Party. What specific steps does the Democratic Party of Nebraska aim to take to change this in the foreseeable future?
Yeah. Well, our second largest city is a woman mayor, Mayor Lyrian Gaylor-Baird.
She's great.
She is great. And so a couple things. One, Jim Pillen and Pete Ricketts are so far from moderate Republicans. Like, I don't know what definition you're using for moderate. And they were both endorsed by Donald Trump in every single election that they've been in. So I'm not sure where that's coming from, and Jim Pillen is right there at every single event with Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump's, biggest donor, Herbster, was thinking about getting into the race, but chose not to, I think, because Donald Trump asked him not to. Jim Pillen's facing a lot of scandal. He gave a $2.5 million no-bid contract to his girlfriend. He's married.
Whoops.
And so there's lots of scandal in the governor's race right now. We have a great woman candidate, Lynn Wall, so hopefully we will be electing the first female governor this cycle.
How's polling looking?
In Nebraska.
I'm curious.
We don't have polling on the governor's race yet. We have unfaves for Pillen. He's at 46 favorable right now, so under 50%. Pete Ricketts and Dana Osborne are 50-50 basically, but that's only if, it's a head-to-head, and there's lots of shenanigans, which I won't go into because that would take like 30 minutes to explain to everybody, and nobody here really cares about that. The reason why I think we haven't won statewide since Ben Nelson left office, I think one reason is because Nebraska, Democrats only 30% of the electorate statewide. And I think one of the reasons why Ben Nelson, when he was able to win previously, and that's true for Montana and North Dakota and South Dakota and Iowa and Ohio, so many of these states in the Midwest and West that used to have Democrats elected statewide, we were a larger portion of the electorate then. The Democratic Party nationally was investing a lot more money into state parties then, so you had a lot more organizing on a year-round basis, and then that money went away. And then the polarization happened with the Tea Party. So Ben Nelson got out because of the Tea Party and because of his vote around Obamacare. And I think that's when you started to see a deep polarization coupled with the no investment in state parties. And so it was kind of a double whammy.
All the trends we've been talking about all day. The young woman student there, I'm prioritizing students, sorry.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. I'm from Arizona, which has been a swing state for as long as I've been alive. And I'm kind of wondering, for both of your perspectives, of how different parties can try to appeal to voters across the entire state. Now there's more Democrats in positions of power, but there's also a strong Republican base. And so kind of, I guess, coming from the Democratic point of view, Kyrsten Sinema was a senator for a long time, became independent, and then was voted out of office. And so things like that where, if a party is so set on having their mainstream ideas, how does that hurt the party? And then also, is that what they should be thinking? Should we be thinking about we need to have this strong set of ideas that we have to follow, or should we be more inclusive about what we follow so that more people will be in line? But at what risk does that cause to kind of losing the party values, which you kind of talked about already? So for both of you.
Yeah. Well, if I had my choice, Republicans would run a very different slate of candidates. They'd be bold leaders that are willing to run on real Republican values, not what you see today. And they'd focus on grassroots and telling their story and ignoring the noise from Washington, D.C. I know that that's difficult and there's a tremendous amount of money, but I think you're starting to see that fear unlock and people more willing to lean into that sacrifice and see what can happen. You also have to have leaders that are incredibly good on their feet, that can meet people where they are. Often joke that on my best days, I can use the fact that I can sit crisscross applesauce in a kindergarten classroom and read to a group of kindergarten students and then turn around and be in a corporate boardroom. And I'm blessed that I can do that, and I need to be appreciative of that power and recognize that I need to be able to sit in all types of rooms. And then maybe my nod to rural America is that there is no better lesson in growing up in a small town. It's the greatest equalizer. No one cares who you are, where you came from, who your parents are. You're all together because you're going to be at church on Sunday, and you better not misbehave because your grandma's going to know by noon. And there, that sense of anonymity that you have in an urban environment just doesn't exist. And I think for some reason, a Republican can kind of remember that sense of community that is so important in rural America, and find people that want to run for office that care deeply for their fellow American and their community member, regardless of party, regardless of skin color, regardless of a religion. And we certainly don't have that right now, and it's a reflection of where the party is shaky right now, and you see that in polling, for sure.
I think Senator Gallego was a really good example in your state of somebody who was able to bring together a coalition of voters and win the same time Donald Trump won the state. And I think he did that really doing a lot of things that you're talking about. He ran sometimes against the party. He's very much against kind of a DC establishment, his brand is. He runs a lot of his experience being a veteran.
Yeah.
And when he had a really interesting article recently, I think it was in the Rolling Stone, because he was nervous, I think, at first of being against the war in Iran. Because I think in previous wars, it was like, you can't be against funding the war, right? And he's taking a firm stance that we should not be there. We shouldn't have gone in there. We should not be there. And he's doing it more from a perspective of, I served on the ground in the Middle East and saw my buddies being murdered for a war that didn't have a plan and didn't have a purpose. And he's using his personal experience. And I think when you're seeing more politicians do that, I think those are the candidates that are going to continue to win at the local, state, and national level. And it'll be interesting for me as in the Democratic Party, we're facing this right now for the 28 cycle, right? And that seems so far off perhaps, but we're in the middle of figuring out our 28 primary internally within the DNC of which states are going to be the early states. And candidates are already circling the wagon of who's going to be, our presidential nominee. And a lot of us as party leaders are talking about what type of candidate do we want. And most of all, we want somebody who's going to be able to go into a rural community, a suburban community, or an urban community and be like a true, real person. And be able to just talk to people and not be either a robot or not be a totally scripted, out of a movie. And that's what we're looking for.
Well, unfortunately, I'm going to have to draw the questions to a close. I think we can say we have neither a robot nor a totally scripted fake politician up here. So please join me in thanking both of our guests. Oh, good Lord, these are heavy. All right, and you can't come to Notre Dame without a little blue and gold. So
thank you. That's
you
very
both
kind of you.
so much for coming in for this presentation. Hey, folks, you made it through day one. Joel, any last minute announcements?
Food.
There's a reception. Even better. Thank y'all.